The rain was coming down hard that Thursday evening at Chicago O'Hare Airport. Travelers rushed through the terminal, pulling their coats tight and dodging puddles that had formed near the entrance doors. The usual airport chaos seemed even more intense than normal. Flight delays were being announced every few minutes, and frustrated passengers were gathering around gate counters, hoping for better news. Among the crowd, a familiar figure moved quietly through the terminal. Barack Obama walked with his head slightly down, wearing a simple navy jacket and carrying a small travel bag. He wasn't surrounded by the usual security detail that people might expect. This was a personal trip, not official business. He had specifically requested to travel like any regular passenger. The airport staff had been briefed to treat him normally, though a few couldn't help but do double takes as he passed by. At Gate B7, the boarding announcement for Flight 447 to Los Angeles crackled through the speakers. Obama joined the line with other first-class passengers, pulling out his boarding pass and checking his phone one last time before putting it on airplane mode. The gate agent, a young woman named Patricia, nearly dropped her scanner when she saw his name on the ticket. "Good evening, Mr. President," she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just Barack tonight," he replied with that familiar warm smile. "And thank you." The plane was one of those newer models, spacious enough but still cramped when every seat was filled. Obama made his way to seat 2A, settling in and nodding politely to the businessman already seated across the aisle. The first-class cabin was filling up quickly with the usual mix of business travelers, a few families who had splurged for the extra comfort, and some folks who looked like they might be frequent flyers getting upgraded. As he buckled his seatbelt, Obama could hear some commotion coming from the main cabin behind him. The sounds were getting louder, not angry exactly, but definitely frustrated. He glanced back through the gap between seats and saw flight attendants moving quickly back and forth. Their faces showed the kind of stress that comes from trying to solve too many problems at once. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're just about ready for departure. We do have a completely full flight tonight, so we ask for your patience as our crew helps everyone get settled. We should be pushing back from the gate in about 10 minutes. Obama opened the book he had brought along, but found himself distracted by the ongoing situation and economy. A flight attendant named Jennifer was speaking in hushed but urgent tones to her colleague near the galley. From what he could overhear, they were dealing with an oversold flight and some passengers who were having trouble with their seating arrangements. "Is there anything we can do about 23B?" Jennifer asked her fellow crew member. "She's really struggling back there." Obama couldn't see who they were talking about, but something in the flight attendant's voice caught his attention. It wasn't the usual customer service frustration. There was genuine concern there, the kind of worry you have for someone who really needs help. A few minutes later, he heard a soft voice from several rows behind him. "Excuse me, I'm so sorry, but I don't think I can reach up there." The voice belonged to a woman who sounded tired and a little breathless. Obama turned slightly in his seat and caught a glimpse of someone in the economy section, struggling to lift a carry-on bag into the overhead compartment. The woman was clearly pregnant, probably in her 7th or 8th month based on what he could see. She was wearing a simple dress that had seen better days, and her shoes looked like the kind nurses wear during long shifts. She was reaching up toward the overhead bin, but even on her tiptoes, she couldn't quite manage to get her bag up there. A man in the seat next to her looked up from his laptop for about 2 seconds, then went right back to his screen. The passenger across the aisle had his headphones on and was completely absorbed in whatever he was watching on his tablet. Nobody seemed to notice that she needed help, or if they did notice, they were choosing to ignore it. Obama watched as the pregnant woman tried again, this time standing on her toes and using both hands to push the bag upward. She was breathing heavily now, and he could see her face was flushed from the effort. The bag wasn't even that big, but when you're carrying another person inside you, everything becomes harder. Finally, a teenager a few rows up noticed what was happening and came back to help her with the bag. The woman thanked him repeatedly, clearly grateful for the assistance. But as she tried to squeeze into her middle seat between two larger passengers, Obama could see this was going to be a long, uncomfortable flight for her. The man by the window was already asleep and taking up more than his fair share of space. The person in the aisle seat was a heavy-set businessman who had claimed both armrests and showed no signs of sharing. The pregnant woman tried to buckle her seatbelt, but her growing belly made it difficult in the cramped space. She shifted uncomfortably, trying to find a position that would work for the 5-hour flight ahead. Every few seconds, she would adjust herself, clearly unable to get comfortable. At one point, she put her hand on her back and winced slightly. The kind of pain that comes from carrying extra weight in a space that wasn't designed for someone in her condition. Obama found himself unable to focus on his book. He kept glancing back at the woman, watching her struggle with something as simple as sitting down. The businessman next to her was now talking loudly on his phone, despite the flight attendant's announcement that all electronic devices should be in airplane mode. He was discussing some deal, using the kind of language that suggested he thought his business was more important than anyone else's comfort. The pregnant woman closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The kind of breath people take when they're trying to stay calm in a difficult situation. She placed both hands on her belly in a protective gesture that made Obama think of his own wife during her pregnancies. He remembered how hard travel had been for Michelle, even when they had access to comfortable accommodations. As the plane started backing away from the gate, Obama made a decision that would change not just the rest of this flight, but the lives of everyone involved in ways none of them could imagine. Obama unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. The businessman across the aisle looked up from his drink, probably wondering why someone would be moving around before takeoff. The former president stepped into the aisle and walked toward the back of the plane, moving past the first-class galley and into the main cabin. The flight attendant named Jennifer was checking seatbelts in the front rows of economy when she saw him approaching. Her eyes widened slightly, but Obama put a finger to his lips with a gentle smile, asking for discretion. He continued walking down the narrow aisle, past travelers who were settling in for the long flight ahead. When he reached row 23, he could see the situation was even worse than he had thought from his seat up front. The pregnant woman was trying to make herself smaller, which was impossible given her condition. She had her arms wrapped around her belly, and there were small beads of sweat on her forehead despite the cool cabin air. The businessman next to her was now eating something that smelled strong, completely oblivious to how his seatmate was struggling. Obama stopped next to her row and cleared his throat softly. "Excuse me, miss." The woman looked up and her eyes went wide. For a moment she seemed to think she might be imagining things. Here was the former president of the United States standing in the aisle of her economy flight, speaking directly to her. "Are you comfortable?" he asked, though the answer was obvious to anyone who looked. Yes, sir. I mean, Mr. President, I'm fine," she stammered, clearly not wanting to cause any trouble. Obama smiled the same warm smile that had helped him connect with people throughout his political career. "I don't think you are, and that's perfectly okay. Being pregnant on a plane isn't easy under the best circumstances." The businessman finally looked up from his meal, suddenly realizing who was standing in the aisle. His mouth fell open slightly, a piece of sandwich still visible. Other passengers in nearby rows were starting to notice too. Some were reaching for their phones, but Obama's calm presence seemed to keep the situation from becoming chaotic. "What's your name?" Obama asked the woman gently. Rosa Martinez," she replied, still looking like she couldn't believe this was happening. "Well, Rosa, I have a suggestion. I'm sitting up in first class and I think you'd be much more comfortable up there. Would you be willing to switch seats with me?" Rosa's hand went to her chest. "Oh no, Mr. President, I couldn't possibly." "That's your seat. You paid for that seat." "Actually, Rosa, someone else paid for that seat. And I think they'd be very happy to know it was going to someone who really needs it." Obama was already reaching for her carry-on bag in the overhead compartment. "Besides, my mother would never forgive me if I didn't offer my seat to an expecting mother." The businessman next to her suddenly became very interested in helping. "Here, let me move," he said, standing up quickly and stepping into the aisle. Other passengers in nearby rows were watching now, some with their phones out, but most just observing this unexpected moment of kindness. Rosa tried one more time to decline. "Really, sir, I don't want to take your seat. You're important. You probably have work to do," Obama chuckled. "Rosa, right now the most important thing I can do is make sure you're comfortable for this flight. Trust me, I've sat in economy plenty of times. It won't hurt me for a few hours." He helped her gather her things, including a worn purse and a small pillow she had brought for the flight. As they moved toward the front of the plane, other passengers began to realize what was happening. Some started taking pictures, but Obama paid them no attention. His focus was entirely on making sure Rosa could walk comfortably up the aisle. Jennifer, the flight attendant, quickly moved to help. She had figured out what was happening and was already preparing to make the seat switch official. "Mr. President, are you sure about this?" she whispered as they passed the galley. "Completely sure," he replied. "Can you make sure she has whatever she needs? Extra pillows, something to drink, whatever makes her comfortable." When they reached the first-class cabin, the businessman who had been sitting across from Obama's original seat looked up in surprise. He was about to say something when he saw Rosa and immediately understood what was happening. Without being asked, he stood up and helped clear the way. Obama guided Rosa to seat 2A, the same seat he had been occupying just minutes before. The leather seat was wide and comfortable, with plenty of legroom and space to recline. Rosa sank into it with a sigh of relief that she couldn't hide. "This is too much," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "I don't deserve this." Obama knelt down next to her seat, bringing himself to her eye level. "Rosa, every person deserves to be comfortable and treated with dignity. You're carrying a precious life, and that makes you pretty special in my book." He helped her adjust the seat and showed her how to use the leg rest. Jennifer brought over extra pillows and a blanket, along with a glass of water and some crackers. Other first-class passengers were watching, but their expressions showed approval rather than annoyance. "When is your baby due?" Obama asked as he helped her get settled. 6 weeks, Rosa replied, placing her hand on her belly. "It's a little girl. That's wonderful. Do you have a name picked out?" Rosa smiled for the first time since he had approached her. "We're thinking about Hope. I've always liked that name." Obama's expression grew even warmer. "Hope is a beautiful name. It's one of the most important things we can give our children." As the plane continued its taxi toward the runway, Obama prepared to head back to Rosa's original seat. But before he left, he turned back to her one more time. "Rosa, I want you to promise me something. If you need anything during this flight, anything at all, you ask Jennifer or any of the crew. Don't worry about bothering anyone. You're the priority right now." Rosa nodded, still looking overwhelmed by the kindness she was receiving. "Thank you, Mr. President. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything. Just take care of yourself and that little girl." Obama made his way back through the cabin, past passengers who were now openly watching and some who were wiping away tears. When he reached row 23, he settled into Rosa's original middle seat. Between the businessman who had been eating and a woman by the window who was pretending to read but was actually watching everything that had just happened. The businessman, who had been so oblivious before, suddenly became very apologetic. "Sir, please take my seat. You shouldn't have to sit in the middle." Obama waved him off with a smile. "This is perfect. Thank you, though." As the plane lifted off into the Chicago evening sky, word of what had happened began spreading through the cabin in whispers. Passengers were sharing the story with each other, and some were posting about it on social media. But Obama seemed completely unbothered by the attention, pulling out his book and settling in for the flight as if he made this kind of gesture every day. What none of them knew was that this simple act of kindness was about to set in motion a series of events that would change Rosa's life forever. About an hour into the flight, when the seatbelt sign had been turned off and passengers were settling into their routines, Obama noticed that the flight attendant Jennifer was checking on Rosa more frequently than usual. Each time she passed by the first-class section, she would pause and ask if Rosa needed anything. It was clear that the crew had been touched by what they had witnessed. Obama was trying to read his book, but he found his attention drifting back to thoughts about Rosa. Something about her reminded him of his own mother when she was young and struggling. There was a quiet strength in her face, the kind that comes from facing difficulties with grace. He wondered what circumstances had led her to be traveling alone while so heavily pregnant. During the meal service, Jennifer stopped by his seat with a concerned expression. She leaned down and spoke quietly so other passengers wouldn't overhear. "Mr. President, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but the young lady in your seat seems really worried about something. She's barely touched her food, and she keeps checking her phone and looking anxious." Obama looked toward the front of the cabin where he could see Rosa staring out the window with a troubled expression. "Did she say anything about why she's traveling?" "She mentioned something about a doctor's appointment, but she seemed really nervous when she talked about it." Obama thought about this for a moment. In his years of public service, he had developed an instinct for when someone was dealing with more than they could handle alone. He had seen that same expression on countless faces during his time as a community organizer, and later as president, when he met with families facing difficult situations. After the meal service was finished, Obama made his way back to the first-class section. Rosa was awake but staring blankly at the entertainment screen without really watching anything. When she saw him approaching, she tried to sit up straighter. "I hope you're feeling more comfortable," he said, settling into the empty seat next to her that the flight attendant had discreetly kept available. "Much better, thank you. This seat is amazing. I've never flown first class before." Rosa's voice was polite, but Obama could hear the underlying worry. "I'm glad. You know, Rosa, I've spent a lot of years listening to people, and I've learned that sometimes when we're traveling alone, especially when we're facing something difficult, it can help to talk about it." Rosa looked at him with surprise. Here was someone who had been president, who had probably dealt with the biggest problems in the world, and he was taking time to ask about her troubles. "I don't want to bother you with my problems, Mr. President. You wouldn't be bothering me at all. Sometimes it helps to share what's weighing on us." Rosa was quiet for a long moment, looking down at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft and filled with worry. "I'm going to Los Angeles to see a specialist. There might be something wrong with my baby." Obama's expression grew serious and compassionate. "I'm sorry to hear that. That must be incredibly frightening. My regular doctor back home found something in the ultrasound that concerned her. She referred me to the specialist at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. They have equipment and expertise that we don't have where I live." "Where is home for you?" "A small town in Illinois, about 3 hours south of Chicago. It's a good place to live, but we don't have the kind of medical facilities that bigger cities have." Obama nodded, understanding how healthcare access could be so different depending on where you lived. It was an issue he had worked on extensively during his presidency. "Are you traveling alone?" he asked gently. Rosa's eyes filled with tears that she quickly tried to blink away. "Yes, the baby's father. He's not in the picture anymore. And I couldn't afford to bring anyone with me. The plane ticket and the medical costs are already more than I can really handle." "What kind of work do you do, Rosa?" "I'm a teacher. 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary. It's in one of the lower-income neighborhoods in our town. Most of my kids come from families that are struggling financially, but they're amazing children, smart and curious and full of hope, even when things are tough at home." Obama's interest was clearly piqued. Education had always been one of his passions, and he had tremendous respect for teachers, especially those who chose to work in challenging environments. "How long have you been teaching?" 8 years. I started right out of college. I could have gotten a job at one of the schools in the wealthier parts of town, where the pay is better and the resources are more plentiful. But I wanted to work where I felt I could make the biggest difference. That's admirable. It takes a special person to dedicate their career to helping children who need it most. Rosa smiled for the first time since their conversation began. "Those kids have given me so much more than I've given them. They've taught me about resilience and joy and finding happiness even when circumstances are difficult. When I found out I was pregnant, some people asked me if I was going to quit teaching and find something easier, but I can't imagine doing anything else." "What about the medical expenses? How are you managing those?" Rosa's smile faded. "I've been taking on extra tutoring jobs in the evenings and weekends. I've sold some of my things. My car is older and paid off, so I don't have car payments. I've cut back on everything I can think of. But even with insurance, the specialist visits and tests are expensive." Obama listened carefully, recognizing the familiar story of someone working hard and trying to do everything right, but still struggling to afford basic necessities like healthcare. "The hardest part," Rosa continued, "is that I might need to take time off work after the baby is born, especially if there are complications. I don't have much saved up, and substitute teacher pay for my replacement means the school budget gets stretched even thinner." "Tell me more about your school. What kinds of challenges do you face there?" Rosa's eyes lit up despite her worries. It was clear that talking about her students and her work was something that energized her. "We have about 300 students, and probably 80% of them qualify for free or reduced lunch. Many of them are being raised by single parents or grandparents. Some of them move frequently because their families can't afford stable housing, but despite all of that, they're incredible kids." She pulled out her phone and showed Obama pictures of her classroom. The walls were covered with student artwork and motivational posters that she had clearly paid for herself. "I try to make my classroom a place where they feel safe and valued. For some of them, school is the most stable part of their day. I keep snacks in my desk for kids who might not have had breakfast. I have a small library of books they can take home, because many of them don't have books at their houses. Obama studied the photos, seeing the care and attention Rosa had put into creating a welcoming environment for her students. What would make the biggest difference for your kids and your school? Resources, mainly. We need more books, especially ones that reflect the diversity of our student population. We need updated computers and better internet access. We need funding for field trips and enrichment programs. But mostly we need smaller class sizes so teachers can give each child the individual attention they deserve. As Rosa talked about her students and her work, Obama found himself increasingly impressed by her dedication and insight. Here was someone who understood education not just as a job, but as a calling to serve others and make a difference in the world. Their conversation continued for another hour, covering everything from Rosa's childhood to her dreams for her unborn daughter. By the time they began their descent into Los Angeles, Obama had learned that Rosa was exactly the kind of person he had spent his career trying to support and empower. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, Obama excused himself and returned to his original seat in economy. But instead of settling in for landing, he pulled out his phone and began making calls. The businessman next to him couldn't help but notice the quiet but intense conversations taking place. Obama's first call was to his assistant in Chicago. Speaking in low tones, he explained the situation and asked her to research Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and their maternal-fetal medicine department. He wanted to know who the best doctors were and what Rosa might be facing in terms of costs and treatment options. His second call was to a longtime friend who worked in healthcare administration in Los Angeles. They had met during Obama's community organizing days and had stayed in touch over the years. Obama explained Rosa's situation and asked if there were any programs or resources that might be available to help with her medical expenses. The third call was to his foundation office. Obama had established the Obama Foundation after leaving office, focusing on developing emerging leaders and supporting community-driven change. He spoke quietly with his program director about potentially creating an emergency fund for educators facing medical crises. As the plane touched down at LAX, Obama was still on the phone, this time speaking with someone from his personal legal team about setting up a scholarship fund. The businessman next to him was openly listening now, amazed at what he was hearing. "Excuse me?" the businessman finally whispered during a break between calls. "Are you doing all of this for that pregnant teacher?" Obama looked at him with a slight smile. Sometimes when you meet someone who's dedicating their life to helping others, you realize you have an opportunity to help them in return. After the plane had parked at the gate, Obama waited until most passengers had disembarked before approaching Rosa again. She was gathering her things slowly, clearly dreading what lay ahead with her medical appointment. "Rosa, I hope you don't mind, but I made a few phone calls during the flight." She looked at him with curiosity and a little concern. "What kind of phone calls?" "Well, I have some friends in Los Angeles, including a few people who work in healthcare. I took the liberty of reaching out to see if there might be some additional resources available to help with your medical expenses." Rosa's eyes widened. "Mr. President, you didn't need to do that. I wanted to. Rosa, you're doing important work as a teacher, especially working with children who need advocates like you. When someone is dedicating their life to helping others, I believe we should all look for ways to support them." As they walked through the terminal together, Obama continued explaining what he had set in motion. His friend at Cedars-Sinai had agreed to review Rosa's case personally and ensure she was connected with the best possible care. More importantly, he had identified some charitable funds available through the hospital that could help cover her expenses. "But that's not all," Obama continued as they reached the baggage claim area. "I've been thinking about what you said about your school and your students. The challenges you described are ones I care deeply about, and I'd like to explore ways to help." Rosa stopped walking and stared at him. "I don't understand." "My foundation works with educators and community leaders who are making a difference in underserved areas. Based on our conversation, I think your school and your students could benefit from some additional support." Obama pulled out a business card and handed it to Rosa. "This is my program director, Lisa Chen. She's going to be calling you in the next few days to discuss some possibilities. We're thinking about establishing a scholarship fund specifically for students at your school and potentially providing some of the resources you mentioned needing." Rosa looked at the card in her hand as if it might disappear. This is too much. I can't accept all of this help. Rosa, let me ask you something. When one of your students is struggling and needs extra help, what do? I help them, of course. And when they say they don't deserve the help or they can't accept it, what do you tell them? Rosa smiled despite her tears. I tell them that everyone deserves help sometimes and that accepting help doesn't make them weak. Exactly. Right now, you're the student who needs some extra support. And just like you help your kids because you see their potential and their worth, I'm helping you because I see the same things. As they waited for Rosa's luggage, Obama made one more call. This time he was speaking with someone about transportation, arranging for a car service to take Rosa to her hotel and to her medical appointments over the next few days. The car will be waiting for you outside, he told her, as her suitcase appeared on the carousel. The driver has instructions to take you wherever you need to go while you're in Los Angeles. Rosa was overwhelmed. She had boarded the plane that morning, worried about how she would afford a taxi to the hospital, and now she had transportation arranged, medical expenses covered, and the promise of support for her school. Mr. President, why are you doing all of this for me? You don't even know me. Obama helped her with her suitcase and began walking toward the exit. Rosa, I've spent my career trying to support people who are working to make their communities better. Teachers like you are the backbone of our society. You're shaping the next generation, often with limited resources and little recognition. They walked past the busy crowds of travelers, Obama continuing his explanation. But more than that, Rosa, you remind me of my mother. She was a teacher too, and she raised me to believe that we all have a responsibility to help each other. When I see someone like you, someone who's facing challenges but still dedicating their life to helping children, I see an opportunity to live up to the values she taught me. As they reached the exit, Rosa turned to face him. I promise you, Mr. President, I will pay this forward. I don't know how yet, but I will find ways to help other people the way you've helped me. Obama smiled warmly. I have no doubt about that, Rosa. I think that little girl you're carrying is going to have an amazing mother, and your students are lucky to have you as their teacher. Outside the terminal, a black car was indeed waiting. The driver approached them and confirmed Rosa's name before taking her luggage. As she prepared to get into the car, Rosa turned back to Obama one more time. Thank you doesn't seem like enough, Rosa. Seeing you succeed and knowing that your students will benefit from additional resources is all the thanks I need. Take care of yourself and that baby and keep doing the important work you're doing. As the car pulled away, Obama watched it disappear into the Los Angeles traffic. He had no way of knowing at that moment just how profound the impact of this day would be, not just for Rosa, but for hundreds of other people whose lives would be touched by the ripple effects of his simple act of kindness on an airplane. 3 months later, on a crisp morning in February, Rosa was holding her newborn daughter in her arms at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The baby was healthy and beautiful, despite the concerns that had brought Rosa to Los Angeles. The specialist had been able to address the issue with a relatively simple procedure, and both mother and daughter were doing perfectly. Rosa had named her daughter Hope, just as she had planned during that conversation on the airplane. As she looked down at Hope's tiny face, she thought about how different things might have been if she hadn't met Obama that night. The medical care she had received had been exceptional, and the financial stress that she had been dreading simply hadn't materialized. A soft knock on the hospital room door interrupted her thoughts. She looked up, expecting to see one of the nurses, but instead saw a familiar figure carrying a small gift bag and a bouquet of flowers. I hope you don't mind an unexpected visitor, Obama said with a warm smile. Rosa's eyes filled with tears of joy and gratitude. Mr. President? I can't believe you're here. I was in Los Angeles for a speaking engagement, and I couldn't leave town without meeting this little lady. Obama approached the bed and looked down at baby Hope with genuine delight. She's beautiful, Rosa, absolutely beautiful. Would you like to hold her? Obama's face lit up. I thought you'd never ask. As he gently took Hope in his arms, Rosa marveled at how natural he looked holding a baby. This was someone who had held the weight of the world's problems, and yet he seemed completely content in this quiet hospital room, cradling a newborn. Hello, Hope, he said softly to the baby. I met your mama before you were born, and I could already tell you were going to be lucky to have her. Rosa watched this moment with wonder. 6 months ago, she had been a struggling teacher facing a medical crisis alone, Now she was watching a former president hold her daughter and speak to her with such tenderness. "Mr. President, I need to tell you about everything that's happened since that night on the plane." Obama settled into the chair next to her bed, still holding hope. "I'd love to hear about it." Rosa's voice was filled with excitement as she began to share her story. "The medical care here was incredible. Dr. Patterson, the specialist you connected me with, she became like a guardian angel. Not only did she take care of the problem with hope, but she made sure I understood everything that was happening every step of the way. And the financial aspect? That's the amazing part. Between the hospital's charitable programs and the fund you helped set up, I didn't have to pay anything out of pocket. Nothing. I kept waiting for bills to arrive, but they never did." Obama smiled, but Rosa could tell he was more interested in hearing about other developments. "But Mr. President, that's not even the best part. Lisa Chen from your foundation called me just like you said she would. How did that go?" Rosa's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "She came to visit our school last month. She spent a whole day there talking to students, observing classes, meeting with our principal and other teachers. And then she told us about the Lincoln Elementary Scholarship Fund." Obama leaned forward with interest. "Tell me about that. It's incredible." "The fund will provide college scholarships for our students, starting with this year's 8th graders who will be applying to high school programs. But it's not just about money for college. The program also includes mentoring, summer enrichment programs, and support throughout high school to help our kids stay on track." Rosa shifted in her bed, getting more animated as she continued her story. 12 of our students have already been selected for the program. These are kids who are brilliant but whose families could never afford college. Kids like David, who wants to be an engineer but whose parents clean office buildings at night to make ends meet. And Carmen, who writes the most beautiful poetry but was convinced that college wasn't for people like her. Obama's expression showed deep satisfaction as he listened to the impact of the program. "How are the students responding?" "They're transformed. You should see how they carry themselves now. They're walking taller, dreaming bigger, working harder. It's not just about the money, although that's important. It's about someone believing in them and showing them that their dreams are possible." Rosa paused for a moment, looking at her daughter in Obama's arms. "But the scholarship fund is just the beginning. Lisa also arranged for our school to receive new computers, updated textbooks, and funding for field trips and arts programs. Our library has been completely renovated with new books and comfortable reading areas. That must have made a huge difference for all your students." "It has. But here's what I think is the most important part. Other people started paying attention. When word got out about what was happening at our school, other donors stepped forward. Local businesses started offering internship programs for our older students. The community college created a special pathway program for our graduates." Obama nodded, understanding how one act of support often catalyzes additional help from others who want to be part of something positive. "And Rosa, what about you personally? How are you doing?" Rosa's voice grew soft and reflective. "Mr. President, that night on the airplane changed my entire life. Not just because of the financial help, although that was crucial. It changed how I see myself and my work." She looked down at Hope, who was sleeping peacefully in Obama's arms. "I realized that what I was doing as a teacher was important enough that someone like you would want to support it. That gave me confidence to think bigger about what was possible for my students and my school. Have you thought about what you want to do going forward?" Rosa's face brightened with excitement. "Actually, yes. I've been working with Lisa and your foundation team on an idea. We want to create a nonprofit organization that supports teachers and schools in underserved communities, not just with money, but with mentoring, professional development, and resources." Obama's interest was clearly piqued. "Tell me more about that." "We're calling it the Hope Initiative," Rosa said, glancing at her daughter. "The idea is to identify dedicated teachers who are working in challenging environments and provide them with the support they need to be even more effective. We'd also work to connect schools like mine with resources and opportunities." "That sounds like exactly the kind of sustainable, community-driven change that creates lasting impact." Rosa's voice grew stronger as she continued. "We've already identified 3 other schools in our region that could benefit from this kind of support. And we're developing partnerships with universities to create a pipeline of well-prepared teachers who want to work in high-need schools." Obama carefully handed Hope back to Rosa, his expression showing deep respect and admiration. Rosa, you've taken what started as a difficult personal situation and turned it into an opportunity to help countless other people. That's exactly the kind of leadership our communities need. I learned from the best, Rosa replied with a smile. You showed me that when you have the power to help someone, you don't hesitate. You just do it. As Obama prepared to leave, he reached into the gift bag he had brought and pulled out a small framed photo. It was a picture of the two of them talking on the airplane, taken by one of the passengers who had witnessed their conversation. I thought you and Hope might like to have this someday, he said, handing her the frame. Rosa looked at the photo with amazement. I had no idea anyone had taken a picture. The passenger who took it sent it to my office. He said he had never seen anything like what happened on that flight, and he wanted to make sure we had a record of it. Rosa studied the image, seeing herself and Obama in deep conversation during that flight that had changed everything. Mr. President, I want Hope to grow up knowing this story. I want her to understand that kindness can change the world, one person at a time. Obama smiled as he prepared to leave. I have a feeling that with you as her mother, Hope is going to learn that lesson very well. And I have a feeling that the Hope Initiative is going to change a lot of lives. As he reached the door, Obama turned back one more time. Rosa, thank you for reminding me why I got into public service in the first place. Teachers like you are the real heroes, and it was an honor to meet you on that flight. After he left, Rosa sat holding her daughter and thinking about the extraordinary chain of events that had begun with a simple act of kindness on an airplane. She thought about her students back home who were now dreaming bigger dreams because someone had invested in them. She thought about the other teachers in schools that would benefit from the Hope Initiative in the years to come. Most of all, she thought about the lesson she would teach Hope as she grew up. That kindness is never wasted, that helping others creates ripples that spread far beyond what we can imagine, and that everyone has the power to change someone's life for the better. As she looked down at her sleeping daughter, Rosa whispered, Hope, you came into this world because of kindness, and I promise to teach you to pass that kindness on to others.